Until the lion tells his side of the story, the tale of the hunt will always glorify the hunter. An African proverb that begs us to question the European American ideologies taught in African business schools built upon inaccurate historical accounts of Africa. I embarrassingly speak English more fluently than any other African language. I grew up sticking German cars on my school books to inspire me to work hard. I would never wear a dashiki or sishweshwe regalia to an important business meeting, strictly suit and tie. I celebrate special occasions at Italian restaurants. I consume American pop culture and television more than anything else, and for the longest time, fervently subscribed to the gospel of the American economist Milton Friedman, and was a staunch believer in free market capitalism and maximizing shareholder value. I live in one of the most unequal countries in the world, according to a consumption expenditure Gini coefficient report by the World Bank. With majority of the country's wealth in the hands of white minorities, and most black South Africans living in poverty. The question is, how did we get here? And how do we correct this grave injustice? My assertion on the latter question is this: Africa is quite diverse and nuanced, and requires African people who have a deep appreciation of Africa's struggles to build business models uniquely for Africa. The challenge is we have adopted business models created to exploit Africa and thrive off her poverty, and try to use them to correct systematic oppression and inequalities these business models were designed to create. It's like giving addictive drugs to try help someone who has a drug problem. Business models that prioritize profit over people, business models that allow executives to get paid millions at the expense of exploited employees and stakeholders, business models that circulate capital in the hands of the wealthy, giving wealthy executives the power to hold governments hostage and avoid taxes. Binary business models that exist to win or be number one in a market by adopting zero-sum practices where to win others must lose. Business models where people get laid off without hesitation, not because of losses, but because of missed profit forecasts. We work for companies with these business models, endeavor to be leaders of these business models. But these business models are not who we are as Africans. Maybe my view of the world has become overly idealistic, but I believe Africa would have never given a Nobel Prize of Economics to someone who is against minimum wage, against the criminalization of drugs, and who believes intentions don't matter when judging policies and programs. Africa got here by being forced into economic arrangements that had little to do with the beneficiation of Africa or her people, but the advancement of business models that favored the brutal slave owner and colonizer. African leaders were allowed political power, but given no economic relevance. Custodians of capital and wealth decide who will govern, who will get the debt to continue governing, and the cost they will pay for this. African leaders take heed to the World Bank, IMF, Moody's, S&P, and Fitch before they listen to the cries of their own people. Therefore, to move forward, we need to firstly dismantle this oppressive system that gives rise to business models that are not African and not designed for Africans. We need business models that reflect our spirit of ubuntu, whose history goes far deeper than European accounts of Africa's history, whose Messiah rhetoric made Africa seem primitive and lacking the sophistication to understand herself and build solutions for herself. Until the lion tells his side of the story, the tale of the hunt will always glorify the hunter. An African proverb that begs us to question the European American ideologies taught in African business schools built upon inaccurate historical accounts of Africa. In the early 1960s, Hugh Trevor Roper, an entire professor of a whole Oxford University, proclaimed that pre-colonial Africa had no history. In 1969, he repeated his contention, labeling the African continent as unhistoric. This thinking also exhibited by Western scholarship in the writings of G.W. Hegel, Immanuel Kant, David Hume, Joseph Conrad, John Carothers, H.L. Gordon, and many others, is indicative of the partial, stereotypical, and biased research which our business academia is built upon. As an entrepreneur in Africa, if your only education of Africa is in what you've read in books and articles on the internet, then you're bound to perpetuate the tragic self-hate and inequality that continues to cripple our economy. The essence of ubuntu is an understanding of your existence because of others and to serve others. The ideal has to be working towards solutions that make us better as a society, and therefore ensure sustainable returns, because the returns are inclusive. People have to come before profits. We have to redistribute wealth and ensure meaningful access to capital and markets. To create products and solutions for Africans by Africans requires ubuntu to be at the heart of our business models. We simply cannot call it innovation and fund it if it has no social relevance. The business plans we preach must advocate ideals of humanity and not just ratios and financial projections that show how to make already wealthy venture capitalists even wealthier. Our thinking has to be African-centered and African-integrated as Africans. We need to write our own African textbooks based on African scholarly research by African thinkers for bespoke African curriculums and African business schools. When you knowingly borrow business insights from a thief, you're not only complicit in their crimes, but enabling them to steal more. We know better and must do better as Africans. My last thought. Entrepreneurship is essential to Africa because it is all about assuming responsibility for problems close to you by seeking to innovate solutions. I don't believe in individuals trying to boil the ocean, but I do believe in a collective effort of eating an elephant one bite at a time. We can't abscond responsibility by blaming the government and hoping business leaders of big business will step up and lead the change. In the spirit of Ubuntu, we all have to come together to build our own inclusive economies. That's how I believe we can get rid of the economic shackles of slavery and colonization that still haunt us today. If we embody the spirit of Ubuntu in how we build business models and grow economies, then I promise you, it's gonna be a movie.